Actually, before we discard this project, I want to show you how to make it look a little bit better. We've got a pretty good foundation here, but with a few more changes, we can actually make it look kind of awesome. So we're going to just go ahead and look at that process. So if I go and I tap the 3 key, you can see it gets smooth, but it loses a lot of its structure. And if I actually go to object mode and deselect it, you can see there's like some weird kind of warbly thing going on there. And the same kind of thing in here where it's getting all melty. So what's happening is when we go into this subdivision mode, it looks at the relative proximity of the edges and determines how sharp the change in the surface should be based on how close those things are. So because we've got this huge edge here where there isn't any supporting stuff, it's basically just doing an average all the way down and kind of getting melty. So if I wanted to add a little bit more support here to keep this top rim a little bit more structural, what I can do is go to Mesh Tools and then Insert Edge Loop. I'm actually just going to pull this off. So we'll go to Insert Edge Loop, and I'm going to add an edge there, and I'm going to add an edge there, approximately the same height down. So we remember how melty it looked before. If I tap the 3 key now, you can see that it is actually looking a lot better. So these are called supporting edge loops, and they're very, very important for creating the high poly geometry. So right now this is just an approximation of what this mesh would ultimately look like if it was eventually smoothed, but I can kind of show what I'm talking about by a high poly versus a low poly. I'm just going to hit Control D and we'll just kind of scoot this over here. So if I tap the 1 key, we can see this has got 490 tries, but if I click this one, we can see it's got 8,000 tries. So that is a huge difference. And that is why this looks all smooth and lovely, and this one is looking fairly blocky. Now, one of the core technologies that makes game art look as good as it does is, as I mentioned this a little bit earlier, you can actually capture the difference in these two surfaces in a series of image maps. They're called textures, and video cards understand how to light this piece of geometry so that it appears to have this level of detail, even though it's only a tiny fraction of the triangle count. So let's go ahead and take a little bit more of a look at how we can do some additional supporting here with our edge loops. Gonna go ahead, and I believe I've got the tool selected right here, so we'll just add one there, and we can add one there. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to sort of preserve what was going on in terms of the curvature there. And then we can add one down there. And these are all quads, so it's very easy for me to add an edge loop. This one may not work, right, because it's actually tries. So we can just use our old trick from the last video of basically extruding it. So I'm going to select that vertex down in the base and go to Edit Mesh, Extrude. Whoops, I need to convert it first. I think that's what I forgot. We'll go to Select and then Convert Selection to Faces, and now we'll extrude. So Edit Mesh, Extrude, going to tap the R key to go to Scale, and now we're basically the exact same thing as if we'd been able to add an edge there. We've got that supporting edge. So now if I hit the 3 key, let me actually hop into object mode. That's the F8 key. We get something that looks like that. So that's looking a whole lot better all of a sudden. This is nice and clean there, but we're still getting some junkiness down there. So go back to 1, and we're just going to repeat that. We'll go ahead and select this vert there. And then let's see, we'll go to Select, Convert Selection to Faces. And then we'll do an Extrude. Tap the R key for Scale. F8 for object mode, and then if I go into 3, we can see, even though there's some strangeness happening right here, which we're not super worried about, the end result is looking a whole lot better. And I'm thinking maybe this stuff is sticking out a little bit further than it should. Again, this is kind of where a reference would be a little bit more helpful. We can actually see exactly what that's supposed to look like. But there you go. That is a better looking coffee cup. There's still some strangeness happening here, and whatever. That's something that we could probably address were we so inclined. But it's okay. We don't have to worry about that. But this is actually a pretty good opportunity now to talk a little bit about the material editor. It's right up here. It's this little green sphere or circle thing, and it's called the Hypershade. So right now, the material that is assigned to this is the default material. It's called a Lambert. And there are 3 general categories of these very, very basic Maya materials: Lambert, Phong, and blends. Let me see if I can make a little more space here. There's not a huge amount of real estate available. So you can see we've got a whole lot of options here. Lambert basically has no highlight. Blend has a highlight that looks like this. So I can just select my geometry and then right click on the blend that I just created and just select assign material to selection. And now you can see we've got a lot more of a shininess there. And then Phong is basically like a hard plastic. So we get a much, I wonder if I did that correctly. So you select the object and then you right click on the material and you go to assign material to selection. Sure, great, okay. So there is our, let's say our shiny ceramic mug. I don't want you guys spending a whole lot of time worrying about this because creating materials like this in Maya is completely outdated now, and there's a much more powerful process for making things look very realistic. But it is not a bad idea for you to kind of get an understanding of like what's going on, big picture. So you can change the color. I can make it a yellow mug if I want. I can modify the transparency. I'm not sure, I guess it looks a little bit like glass, but it's not a hugely selling it here. And the rest of the stuff you just don't really need to worry about. There's the cosine power, I believe. Some of these things are also specific only to, like cosine power I think only lives on a Phong material, whereas a blend is going to have like a specular, let's see, specular roll off. That's like how you can see kind of what's going on up here, how specky it is, how reflective it is, whatever. All this stuff, again, not really worth messing with at all. There's a much more powerful way of making this stuff happen. But I kind of want to just give you, like I said, a little bit of a crash course, because why not? We've got a coffee cup here and we can do some interesting things to it. So let's go ahead and we'll just set this back to our little blend here. And there you go. All right, so that's probably good enough. A little bit of an introduction to the hypershade and how to make something look like it's got some more surface detail than maybe it does, just by hitting the preview here. And if I wanted to actually use this in a proper mesh, what I would do probably is go back to 1, and then you can just go to, I think there's a mesh smooth. I'm going to delete this history real quick. I'm going to delete by type just because we're about to add another history node. So mesh smooth. And this is actually no longer in a preview mode. This geometry now is baked in. You can see it's actually a lower poly count because the preview is giving us more subdivisions. But I can come over here to the poly smooth face, to divisions, and set this to 2. And you can see it gets smoother and smoother, and my poly count gets higher and higher. So if you wanted to actually use this geometry in like a high-low bake scenario, which again, if that doesn't mean anything to you, don't worry about it. This is what you would need to do. You can't export it with the preview on. You've got to actually convert it, I believe. So, and you can also still send this into preview mode as well. So I just hit 3 and you can see now I've got 168,000 triangles, which is a whole lot more than I need. Anyway, okay, that'll wrap it up for this video. And the next video we'll do another modeling demo.